Hey y'all, back at it again. Alright, so I'm sorry for not uploading yesterday. I actually forgot to film this. So this is me doing it in the middle of the morning, exhausted, and, well, still finding my voice. As you can tell, it's not necessarily as upbeat as it usually is. Anyways, this is the review for Smallville Season 1, Episode 2. For those of you who watched the first episode review, I think it's important to note that although Whitney was a semi-antagonist of that episode, he comes around to be somewhat of a pseudo-protagonist in this episode. This episode has a special place in my heart because it's the first episode I actually remembered watching. And I remember watching this episode because it was the first episode that there was a real action sequence in it. There was a real fight scene in this episode, which is something I enjoyed being able to see at such a young age. This one had, I don't remember exactly what the name is. But anyways, Smallville Season 1, Episode 2 has this character of this really socially awkward, not necessarily all that good-looking kid who winds up getting enhanced strength and different, insect-like abilities. And those insect-like abilities offer him the ability to wreak havoc against those that he feels have wronged him and take advantage of things that he never thought he'd be able to take advantage of. He sets his eyes on getting Lana Lang because he really wants Lana Lang. Which is kind of, it's a very creepy episode. I mean, it is very creepy, but at the same time, I thought it was immaculately put together. This one isn't necessarily all that developing in terms of story, but there is a line from Lex Luthor when he's talking to Lana Lang about Clark having pulled her boyfriend Whitney Foreman out of a car that was about to explode, and Lex Luthor walks over to Lana Lang and he says, it's kind of interesting. You have one guy who saves lives, and you have another guy who throws around a football. I like that line because Lex Luthor doesn't really know much about Clark Kent, but he sees Clark Kent as such like that of a little brother or best friend, even though they've had such few interactions, that he really wants to hold on to this good-hearted, non-motive seeking, non-motive having individual that he's trying to help out Clark with his love life, which is kind of interesting. I just like that little character development. It shows the good-heartedness of Lex Luthor, and it shows the desire to help and help people see the good in other people. It shows his good intentions, even though eventually it doesn't necessarily work out for him in the end, which is kind of upsetting, in all honesty. But I mean, there's not much development in terms of Clark Kent and his story, as much as there is just him accepting his responsibility a bit more, which I think is a nice little touch on the character. Whitney Foreman is, as I mentioned, a pseudo-protagonist of this episode. Very interesting to see him go from a bully in the first episode to being a resentful individual, someone who doesn't like the fact that he did what it is he did, and he's actually trying to make up for it. He's actually the one who saves Lana Lang in this episode. It's not Clark Kent. Clark is faced with having to... We get introduced to the meteor rocks in this episode, which is interesting. This is when he finds out that he's allergic to kryptonite. He finds out he's allergic to meteor rocks, and he's not necessarily capable of handling the radiation from those meteor rocks. And this is because the final fight of that episode takes place in an old warehouse where lots of meteor rocks have been found and dug up, right? Which is where the antagonist of the story got his powers. Pretty cool. So there is some development in terms of Clark's story, in terms of how he becomes more of a hero in the future. But really there's not much of an interesting life lesson here other than stay away from creepy stalker type individuals who are willing to take you and do whatever the heck they want to do with you. The development of the characters is much slower in this episode, but this is the first time that there's a fisticuffs fight. between Clark and blah, 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 between Clark and an antagonist of the show. So I did enjoy getting to see that when I first watched it as a kid, and like I said, that is the first episode I remember watching. So it's really awesome to see this and be able to pick it apart like I have. And like I said, this episode really isn't necessarily all that involved as much as it is just kind of, you know, it is in essence a filler episode. But at the same time, it's not so much a filler episode that is boring or lame, but at the same time has some story purpose and some development, which is integral to the plot and to the character arc of Clark Kent over his 10-season arc, which I really enjoy. Getting to see him learn, hey, I'm allergic to meteor rocks. So that's one part of it, the story that I actually really enjoyed about this episode, and I really like to see those kinds of little bits and pieces strewn in here and there. That being said, I don't really have much more to talk about for this episode. It was a very simple, very straightforward episode. I enjoyed it. I hope you guys enjoy it too if you watch it. And yeah, that's it for me today.